unrest in the United Kingdom as well. Well, UK is witnessing its worst riots in almost a decade. Over 90 people have been arrested. But what really prompted these violent demonstrations across the country? When it was the stabbing of 3 young girls in Southport. There was some misinformation about that incident that triggered these anti-immigration protests across the country. There you can see those dramatic visuals as well of those anti-immigration protesters facing off with the riot police there. And the government has said that rioters and protesters across the country will have to pay. Take a look at this ground report from Bristol.
Castle Park around me. Everyone's going about their normal business. It's very calm, just a typical Sunday morning in this park. Eventually, the disorder, which began quite seriously at about 7:30, it pushed its way down here. You can see the bridge behind me. That was where our cameraman actually got hit on the head with a glass bottle. There was, at one point, a bus was stranded in the middle there with protesters all around them. And then eventually, after a couple of hours of violence, of projectile throwing, cans, bottles, it dispersed a bit, and there was a pocket of far-right groups, I should say, that headed down to a hotel further down the road that is known for housing migrants. I think in terms of looking at a clean-up operation, there's been a few people around here this morning picking up pieces of glass, sweeping up glass, picking up bottles, things like that, and then you've got signs like this here. I'm not sure whether or not this was written last night, but it really shows the sentiment of the people here in Bristol. They're very much distancing themselves, the majority at least, from those scenes of violence last night. As you said, though, 14 arrests. Avon and Somerset police have said that we can expect more in the coming days as well. And there's actually been a statement released by the Police and Crime Commissioner for Avon and Somerset, who thanked police officers last night for their bravery and described a small but violent group. And as Tom was saying there were certainly the people who were creating trouble. They were certainly the minority here, outnumbered by anti-racist protesters for sure. But the Police and Crime Commissioner described a small and violent group seeking to bring unacceptable disorder and violence to the streets. And she actually said that this behaviour is not a protest, it's not an expression of legitimate concern, it's criminal. And again, in keeping with that national message that we keep hearing over and over again, those words, feeling the full force of the law, she goes on to say these actions don't represent the values of Bristol. We're a strong, diverse and vibrant community, and people from all walks of life live peacefully alongside one another.
Well, the police need to lead operations in communities across the country where there has been both violent disorder and thuggery on the streets, which is completely unacceptable, completely damaging, and where the police need to know they have our full support, taking the strongest possible action, making sure that these criminals face the full force of the law. And also already there are some of the suspects and perpetrators have already been arrested, already facing charges and are in custody, but we expect more of that to continue, and we will support the police every step of the way. Communities have a right to be able to feel safe.
And joining me on the broadcast this evening, Naresh Kaushik, a senior journalist who keeps a close eye on the developments in the UK. Thanks very much, sir, for being with us. How do you see these violent protests across the UK? Because it seems like, a wider movement, because it's not just confined to one district or one city, but these are demonstrations across the country.
Vedant, first thing I would say is it's not, despite the visuals seen on our screens, it's not as widespread as it appears. So it's in several cities, in pockets, in small towns as well. But it's not that it's a nationwide protest. And the second thing is you also have counter protests. So as your reporter pointed out, in some cases, the anti-fascist protests outnumber the far-right protesters. So one thing of reassurance to people is that not every Black or Asian person is under threat in Britain at the moment. It's a small number of people. Nevertheless, they are quite vocal. And as you know, any vocal protesters, they do make headlines and create some kinds of fear. And this is not only happening in this country, this is happening across Europe. As you know, there are six European countries where far-right governments have come to power. In Britain, actually defied the trend. It elected a relatively, I won't say leftist government, but center-left Labour government came to power recently. So, and as you heard from the Labour Home Secretary, the Home Minister, she has made it very clear that these protesters will face the full force of law, and there have been many
Yes,
arrests.
but
So police are
Mr.
taking
Kaushik,
strong
also
action.
looking at the larger point here, that many think tanks have also pointed this out, that there's something simmering beneath the surface, because this cannot be just one trigger. Of course, the fake news about the incident that happened in Southport was the immediate trigger, but there's something larger, the narrative, the rhetoric that we've been seeing in the UK, and something beneath the surface.
Well, the most important thing is the immigrants. And you have these small boats coming from France across the channel. And they have been coming for several years. And they have increased in the last few months. And in summer months, they always increase. And in the last election, although a Tory party, which is a right of centre party, they
Right.
lost the election to Labour, but there was an anti-immigrant party which garnered millions of votes,
Right.
and they even for the first time they got 5 seats in parliament.
Right. So, of
So
course, the immigration issue
anti-immigration
certainly is
sentiment is
something
there.
that is
There is
at
no
the core
doubt
of
about
this,
it, and that has
which
been
is why,
simmering.
perhaps we're seeing these violent protests across the country. But as you say, these are not as widespread as they seem, and there are counter protests too. Naresh Kaushik, thanks very much for being with us this evening.